Would you like to know more?
Welcome to Almost a Podcast, episode 35 of Adventures in 3D Printing. And today we're talking about some Cromarty Forge Lizardmen. John at Cromarty Forge has given me some early access to some STL files, so I'm going to be printing out and looking at some of the files that you can buy, and also you can buy these as metal miniatures in the Cromarty Forge tradition, and you'll have them no doubt a couple of weeks after the Kickstarter finishes, so you'll have them by Easter. So he's gone for a non-traditional Lizardman army in that it's based in Egyptian, so like sand rather than the kind of South American kind of forest-based lizards. So we've also, that allows us to sneak in some snake cult with a bit of Conan overtones, which are the two-headed snake cult in Conan is one of there's a two-headed there's a two snake on the shield. It's Conan the Barbarian is such a the original, not the remake. It's such the one with Arnie in it. It's such an amazing film. And the kind of James Earl Jones snake cult leader and the kind of two henchmen with the one with the big mole. Just phenomenal film. If you haven't seen that, because maybe you're not 50 years old like me, maybe that's something you could do. Treat yourself and watch the original Conan the Barbarian. Don't worry about the second one. It really does fall off a cliff. Unfortunately, I think they tried to make it a lower rating to get more box office, and that really doesn't work particularly well. Right, so here we go, back on track. We have Lizardmen. So these are your saurus. So we've printed off a unit of saurus with a couple of alternative banners and a couple of alternative kind of character leader kind of stands that go with the units. So as I've said, we got some snake motif running through them and kind of this kind of Arabic weaponry, isn't it? Kind of curved swords and scythes and yeah, nice. A nice kind of Arabic feel to them. These are good-looking models. Good-looking models, and they got feet because my new setup allows me to not have as many issues as I was always having. One thing about 3D printing that I've learned is the resin printing, the actual printer itself, and the slicing stuff isn't that complicated really. Cleanup and stuff, and that can be quite hassly, and the consumables, if they go, like the screen and stuff, that can obviously be a headache. But there are very few moving parts compared to the FDM printing. There are far more moving parts and far more variables to control in the FDM printing world. So here you just turn it on. 2 hours later, you've got a bed full of these fellas. My bed takes about, if you're really greedy, you could get almost 3 units in, but 2.5 units. So I tend to do 2 units and then some characters or something to fill up the stand, fill up the space. I think on the remainder of this bed, I put a 28mm 50 cal for my Sherman tank, just to fill up the end, because you kind of get a unit takes up about just over 1/3 of the bed. So 2 units is more than 2/3 of the bed, and so you've got like an end of a bed which is about maybe a 1/4 of a bed left. So I tend to, you can either reorientate them, these fellas, 90 degrees, so you can put them the other way around perpendicular and get a couple more, maybe 4 stands on, or I tend to just use that to kind of print whatever I'm wanting to print that's not necessarily to do with these. Anyway, I'm waffling on about nothing. So here are your saurus warriors. And best infantry in the game. In fact, so much so that people have to come up with a really good justification to get these into any other list, because they really are bang for buck, unbelievably good. If they're in defended terrain, they're a hell of a job to get out. And because when you charge them, they're as good as you generally, and that's if you're good infantry. So if you're an elf spearman with your 3/3/5 plus stat line, if you charge these, you get 4/3/5. And these are 4/3/5. So if you charge these and these are defended, forget about it. Forget about it. But for that 75 points, they do have negative traits connected with being cold-blooded, which that really is a big issue. So they can only be ordered with a 20 centimeters range maximum, a bit like undead stuff. So yeah. So Paul's got some of these in metal, so it'll be interesting to see if I get the metals and the 3D printed stuff together, what they will look like. And the Kickstarter is coming, I think it's this week, like Thursday or something, running for 3 weeks. Very modest total that he's going for. I think it's only about 500 quid. So I said, yeah, realistically, if you don't get 500 quid, it's time to back it in, because you'll be earning like £1 an hour. And then we got some of the character stands. Oh, that's the character stand for the wrong unit. So that's a spoiler. That's the unit that's coming next. So what have we got here? So we have the snake cult running through. This is brilliant. Brilliant. Maybe we'll get the blue ruler of justice out and see what scale they are. But I think we know where they're going to be 10mm, don't we? So get on the base. Well, maybe a fraction over. Maybe. Yeah, maybe 11mm. But I mean, they are saurus. They're quite beefy fellas, aren't they? I talked to John about this one when I recorded the main podcast yesterday, about how this reminded me very much of the High Elf variant command that had a horse running through the spearmen, which just made me laugh when I first saw it, because you don't normally have mixed kind of cavalry in with infantry traditionally in Warhammer Fantasy and stuff, and just having that horse model in the middle of the spearmen just looked like completely bonkers. And this riding the cold one, or whatever he's riding, I know there's a special name for it. It's not a cold one at all, but I mean, in the game it's a cold one. It's like some kind of dinosaur, isn't it? Some with a point. Yeah, look at that. He talks about it on the main podcast about what kind of a dinosaur it is, but I just think it's kind of ludicrously funny to have this fella riding with the infantry. But that's cool. That's what you want to see. It's fantasy after all, isn't it? We want to have fun. So these are the Saurus command strips. A little bit of cleanup needed here, but I mean, there was hardly any supports on it. So the fact I missed these ones on the arm here, I mean, there are hardly any supports at all on these in these models to clean up. Now, these I think are the equivalent of temple card, but you could use them as whatever you want. I think these guys are awesome. This reminds me of a Pokemon. I can't remember. Alolan? No, I can't remember. I'm going to shut up. I played a bit of Pokemon with my kids. This definitely reminds me of a Pokemon, but I can't. It begins with M, the name. God damn it. That's brilliant. So that's not. It's made. He's wearing a mask of a dead animal's skull, isn't he? That's brilliant. And these halberds, awesome. So let's measure one of these fellas up. I mean, these are obviously going to be more than 10mm because they're bigger than the other ones, I think. So what is that? Oh, not much bigger than the other one, actually. That looks about the same, doesn't it? Maybe it's just to do with my eyes. The other ones looked a bit more hunched over. Maybe it's the weapons that make these guys look bigger, but they're roughly the same size vertically. So maybe if we get the other ones back. Maybe that I picked one that was stood upright because they do seem a little bit taller. Maybe not. So we got those ones, and then we got the strip of, because there are 5 different strips of these fellas. Look at those spiky horns. That's brilliant. These are a real challenge. If you saw how small in reality, like those spikes are here, that I'm pointing at here. If you saw how small those spikes are, in pewter they would be virtually uncastable, because I'm not even sure you could vent out of those if they didn't cast. So because they're too small, they'd be damaged, and they're so small that when you mould them, when you pull the sculpt out of the mould, the tips of these break off, and you can't get them out of the mould because you'd have to dig a hole in the mould to get them out. So the spikes get smaller the more you mould them, because little bits get left in, especially if green stuff sculpts get left into the actual mould when you demould the sculpt. So getting spikes like that is something that 3D printing does incredibly well. I mean, they might be a little, but they don't feel that brittle to me. I mean, God, anything's brittle if you, I mean, you can break anything if you go at it hard enough, but I'm carrot-fingered, I'm clumsy, and they're not breaking under my touch. So, and I'm not doing anything special. I'm not adding any kind of flexible resins. I'm not doing this 80-20 mixing stuff. I'm just getting out of a bottle and putting it in and printing. Because let's keep life simple. There's enough complexity in life at the moment. So yeah, brilliant. Those spikes and wings. Wings are absolutely awful to cast in metal. God damn, I hate casting wings. In fact, in future, I'll maybe just find a way to print bloody wings. Get wings sculpted separately and print the wings, and then just provide people resin printed bloody wings, and not try to have to sculpt wings. Because the issue with wings is they're big flat surfaces with then delicate details on the edges. So getting the metal to flow through to the edges, and especially if there's like spikes and as bird wings tend to have, and feather tips, and oh my God, wings are hard work. Okay, and then the final thing we're going to look at today is the command strips for the bigger, like Templey Guard, or I think the croc seagulls are kind of like some snakes. I'm still loving that snake vibe running through them. It's fantastic. This guy's got a book. He's going to war with a book. I don't need no weapon. Oh, he's got a big axe too. Fair enough. Book in one hand, big axe in the other. Seems like a plan. Seems like a plan. If you haven't seen the podcast, which you may not have, because this might come out before the main podcast. Not only is John doing an entire range in both STLs for home printing and metal that he's going to create and sell and send out. He's actually done a terrain set that goes with it, and a Blood Bowl team. Jeez. What a world we live in. What a world we live in. So this is your Cromarty Forge, I don't know what, the Children of APEC or something, I think he called them. So something like that, APEC. You watch the other video, watch the main video, and you'll find out all about it. Kickstarter starts Thursday, and yeah, watch the main podcast, and I'll be printing some more out of these this week. See you next time.